Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give people just another minute to join, and then we will begin the webinar. All right. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Executive Edition webinar, The State of Resident Engagement in 2025. For today's webinar, we are providing one free NCCAP, NCCDP, NCTRC, NAB, and NCSDRT credit. To be eligible to receive one of these CEU credits, you'll need to remain on the webinar for the full hour. At the conclusion of the webinar, a quick Zoom webinar feedback survey will pop up. This is not the CEU survey, but we appreciate any and all feedback to make sure our webinars continue to provide value to you. We will be providing the post-webinar CEU survey link in the chat toward the end of the webinar. We will also send it by email this afternoon. Please make sure that you check your junk and spam folder for the survey email if you do not see it in your inbox by end of today. The CEU survey must be completed by midnight Eastern Standard Time this Thursday, February 13th. The CEU certificates will be issued by email before the end of the day this Friday, February 14th. Once again, please make sure you check your junk and spam folders for the CEU certificate if you do not see it in your inbox. As with all of our webinars, we encourage everyone to participate in the chat throughout the webinar. So please let us know where you're coming from, and if you have any questions or comments on the topics being discussed, please feel free to enter them in the chat. If you have a specific question for Charles or Ashley, please submit those in the Q&A box. Thank you for joining us, and now I'm going to turn it over to Charles.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you so much for that introduction. Welcome, everyone. This is our Activity Strong Executive Edition, State of Resident Engagement in 2025. One of my favorite topics on one of my favorite platforms. So again, welcome, take a seat. Like Emily mentioned, please use the chat as much as you want. Just make sure that you select the drop-down that says everyone so that everyone can see your contribution. And if you want to get started with something, like Emily said, just please let us know where you are coming from. As a reminder, Activity Strong was started almost 5 years ago, actually, more than 5 years ago, sorry, in partnership with NAP, NCAP, and Activity Connection. As stated before, my name is Charles de Vilmorin. A little bit about me, I am the co-founder and CEO of Linked Senior, which was recently acquired last summer by LifeLoop. And I am now the general manager, Linked Senior at LifeLoop, and very excited about that. Just a few more things is, years ago, I had the immense privilege of going through MEPAP 1, which is one of the best activity director course out there. I believe that all people are cool and that our industry, senior living, our industry is quote unquote activity strong. About LifeLoop, I think the most important part to understand about LifeLoop is that our goal, there's only one goal, which is for senior living communities to flourish. And with that, it means residents, staff, family members, the community itself to really thrive. The platform is designed to enrich the experience of the resident, not only through content, but also how we empower staff to do what they love to do, which is to be connected and help residents find purpose every day. We're very excited about some of our most recent work, which includes launching a really cool AI-enhanced calendar management tool. And you really got to see it. In the product, you can type up different types of requests, and the solution would offer suggestion in terms of activities based on who the residents are and what are the prompts. So it's kind of really cool, very easy to use AI. And then the last thing I just wanted to share in terms of who we are, we're very honored to touch the lives of 1 in 6 seniors today. that live in communal setting. And we're on track to touch 1 in 3, so great ambitions, but 1 in 3 by 2027. We have a passion for improving people's life through technology, and we simply envision a future where senior living is exceptional for everyone. So if you have any questions about our work, the work of LifeLoop, please be in touch either by requesting a demo, sending us an email, or just whatever means we have to get in touch. Thank you. So as I mentioned, engagement obviously is kind of my passion. Very happy, very lucky I kind of stumbled into senior living. When we launched Activity Strong, we started doing these state of resident engagement just to get the year started on the good foot, and just to give some data, insights, and just to share with you a little bit of the trend that we see in the market. So I think that we were actually the first ones to start with this, and this is our 5th one. Today, I'm honored to be joined by someone that I can call a friend, I can call a colleague now, as she uses our services really, really well. But also, she's also a quote unquote #dementia nerd, and her name is Ashley Smalley. She's the National Director of Life Enrichment and Memory Care for a great organization called Grace Management. And Ashley will join us in about 15 minutes to share a little bit of her perspective, especially on a tool that we're going to share with you that you can use in your team, in your department, in your community and organization. So stay tuned. And I'm just simply going to get us started with the agenda. So we're going to go through like an introduction. I'll share perspective on a few items that we have been noticing. With that, we'll share data and then kind of get into recommendations if you want to improve. And I know that 99% of activity, if not 100% of activity professionals want to improve the work they do every day. And then I'll share a little bit about what we see as the future, which is this notion of social prescription. Hey, Ashley, how are you? I just kind of briefly introduced you and share the fact that in about 10, 15 minutes, you'll be helping us with some of the results. So thank you for joining. Everyone, if you want to greet Ashley, maybe just say, hey, Ashley, in the chat and welcome her. So briefly, just insights on how our session today is going to get started. So, I thought of, what are the overall trends that we have been noticing in the market. And as you probably know, there's just so much happening these days. And there are 3 that I thought were worthwhile kind of spending a couple minutes on, that are one, dear to my heart, 2, really, I think, going through a fundamental change, and I think interesting and useful for you all to know. So the first one is this notion of dementia inclusion. The second one is how we're seeing organizations really being intentional about resident engagement. And the third one, whether you know nothing or a little bit or a lot about value-based care, this is one of the most fundamental trend happening in the industry in senior living. So I just wanted to kind of share a little bit about this. Again, these are more said to be inspirational and high-level education. And yeah, so as I mentioned, Ashley is a quote unquote dementia nerd, and we're part of this group. I love dementia, not because I want more people to have dementia, just simply because I think that we should talk more about dementia. And so if you don't know what dementia inclusion is about, think of this simple question, which is, if I had dementia, why would you treat me differently? Right? And I think that's a great place to start. And to give you a little bit of perspective, we've come a long way as an industry. Years ago, about 20 years ago, we would tie people up if they lived with dementia, right? Because we didn't know enough about the Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia. We didn't know better. And, there's a great organization based in Pennsylvania called Kendall, which facilitated a law in Pennsylvania, which became a federal law, which is this Untying the Elderly initiative. And I know that we all, as activity professionals, learn that engagement is the best thing that we can do to help people living with dementia. Like behavior expression come usually from pain or boredom. But there is still a lot of education to be brought up. I don't know if you're familiar. It's pretty sad to see, but we still have um, physical restraints sold on Amazon, right? So obviously these are banned and it's very hard for them to use them in senior living. But I like to point out to these aspects because there are still pockets of areas where we need to educate ourselves or need to educate people on the fact that these physical restraints are probably not the first intervention and sometimes even the last. We just don't want to be able to entertain them. But I also like to argue that there's still a lot of room for us to grow in our industry, especially when you consider, like one of my biggest soapboxes is the use of antipsychotics, right? So we've moved from physical to chemical restraints, and we're obviously trying to reduce them. But then how can we move further and really enable this notion of freedom? And so there's a general movement to think about how can we remove locked doors. I don't know if you know this, but there's a country, the country of Netherlands actually, who has banned them since 2020. So there's a lot of discussions happening on that. And don't be scared. Like, we're not gonna remove locked doors in a day or a week or maybe a month, but there's a general movement of how can we bring more freedom to our residents. So that's trend number one. Trend number two is really something that I, as with my history of being the co-founder and CEO of Link Senior, where I'm really, really passionate about, which is, how can we as organization, as industry, be more intentional when it comes to resident engagement? And there's a lot to be said, but a couple of thoughts, which is that most of our communities make a marketing promise to our residents and families, right? In the form of move into our community, you'll get person-centered therapeutic engagement every day, almost, right? That's kind of the promise that we hear. Now, are we delivering on that promise? That's another question. Most of the activity professionals that I interact with find it very, very challenging. In the last, and obviously accelerated with COVID, but I want to say that in the last 2 to 3 years, we've noticed organization just be much more intentional about how can we make sure we deliver on that promise. And there's a lot to it, and I'll share more in the third part of our webinar today. But there are frameworks you can think about if you are a one-person team, if you're a multi-people lead and the leader of that, or if you are at the top, like Ashley's role, like somebody at corporate supporting multiple communities. There are ways to make it intentional. One of my personal favorite one is really to think about data, right? So I know this is an old report. There hasn't been any government-sponsored report since, but there is a lot to be said. How can we drive our programs using data, okay? So when you think about the fact that, this has improved, but overall, the quantity and quality of programming offered isn't enough and isn't good enough. Why don't we attack this with KPIs and data and help ourselves by managing that way? And so to give you an example, and maybe to prompt discussions with you and your team members, this is a de-identified, but a real snapshot of an organization that I took yesterday. So this is a partner of ours where across more than 100 communities, they use data in real time to know, are we engaging all of our residents and how, right? So the print here is pretty small, but some of you might read that we have 2,475 lives, and these are real lives, obviously, but real in the system. And the people at the corporate, at the regional, and at the community level have the tools to know that we are engaging our residents and how. Again, in the third section of our webinar today, I will be providing recommendations when it comes to these specific metrics. But wouldn't it be cool to have a tool to know if we're actually delivering on a marketing promise? So that's the kind of the second big thing that we're seeing. And then the third one is all about this concept of value-based care. And I just want to start here by acknowledging the fact that there's two levels that you can think about value-based care, right? The first one is what it is really simply, it's a payment mechanism, right? But if you put that aside, because of that payment mechanism, it is creating change in almost every pocket of senior living and definitely activities and life enrichment, right? So when you hear about things like wellness revolution or outcomes focused or preventative senior living, all of these changes are change being brought because of this value-based care shift. So I highly recommend you take a few minutes to educate yourself on what that means for your organization, for you. In essence, it's quite simply, I can tell you that it's a great thing for activities because it's aligning all of us on the right thing to do for the resident, right? Essentially, that is one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of the changes that we're seeing. There's a lot to learn on this. I don't know if you read this book called Live Long, Die Short. It is one of my favorite book when I like to think about all of these changes. As you can see, it was published more than 11 years ago, but it sets the premise on wellness and these outcome-based programs that we're building in senior living. It is definitely in the journey of wellness, as I mentioned. And if you have questions or if you're trying to think about ways to improve your wellness approaches, ICAA, which is the International Council on Active Aging, has a lot of resources, one of which I will be highlighting in the third section of our webinar today. And then the last thing I'll say for us all to understand the impact of value-based care is just one prompt, which is to say that if you look at our healthcare system, where we spend our healthcare dollars is most of it goes, 88% goes towards what's called clinical care versus the rest, right? And that on the left-hand side, as you can see, only produces 20% of clinical care. So the value-based care payment mechanism, again, is bringing this overall shift to our industry by elevating engagement. In essence, it is over time and quite quickly actually going to be elevating the work that you all do in activities and life enrichment, which is again why I'm so excited about this change, because it's going to improve everything, including your line of work. So this was a little bit of an introduction, the trend that we're seeing in the market. This is one, so that kind of concludes the three trends I wanted to share. I wanted to introduce a tool that we are making available for you all to use. And this came about, I think, 4 years ago, where in working with different organizations, people were asking, how can we improve the work that we do around engagement, life enrichment, memory care, and so on. And if you don't have a business background, it's okay. There's a very simple tool out there called SWOT, S-W-O-T, which stands for strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so it's an exercise, and if you use your phone, you can download a free copy of this tool, and I highly recommend you do this. And it's an exercise you can sit down with your team. Even if you're alone, it's a good way to just kind of center and kind of think about what you're doing. But you can also use it organization-wise, and that's what Ashley is going to walk us through in just a second. Before we do this, let me explain one thing which is important about the exercise to save you time. It is a tool for you to improve, and for you to improve, you need to understand where you are. And so it's going to help you list, again, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat. The biggest question that we get is, what's the difference between a strength and an opportunity? Or what's the difference between a weakness and a threat? And the simple answer to that is, think of strengths and weaknesses as things that you control, and opportunities and threats are things that you do not control, right? So for example, a threat could be COVID, could be staffing, right? A weakness maybe could be your lack of dementia care education, right? You can address this, right? In the next quarter, you can decide, I'm going to take a course on dementia care. So with that, I'm going to let Ashley give us insights on how she's applied this tool and hopefully help you understand how this can be so valuable for you, your teams, your organizations. Ashley, do you want me to share your slides or, okay. And
Yeah, you
welcome,
can.
Ashley. I'm excited to
Thank
have
you.
you. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Sorry, I'm dual booked today, so I was a little bit late, but happy to be here today. So this SWOT tool is something that I saw through a webinar just like this with Link Senior a couple of years ago. And so we've done it 2 years in a row now for memory care. And last year we opened it up and did it for all of our life enrichment programs across our portfolio. For me, so I'm coming in from a corporate level position overseeing multiple communities. And for me, data is power, right? And life enrichment is one of the most difficult aspects, right, to measure in so many ways. And so one of the big things I wanted to see in using this tool was identify kind of any patterns that were across the entire organization that we could address systemically, right? From the individual perspective, though, I think this is such a powerful way to understand, kind of in a self-reflective way, though, of what is going on in your programming from kind of a different perspective, like almost zooming out and seeing the whole picture. Because in memory care and life enrichment, we get one part of the picture, right, in what we're doing. And so being able to kind of zoom out and see how much our team, our programming intersects with other aspects of the community is super important. So for me, this really allowed my team to kind of do some self-reflection, but also to see how important the work they're doing is to even supporting the business as a whole. Because at the end of the day, we work in businesses. And so what we do impacts the success of those. And it's really important to kind of be aware of this. So for me, when I adapted it, I put in some kind of guided questions in each of these categories that were specific to some of the programs that we run here at my company. And I gave the teams a month to work on it, right? And said, sit down together collectively, right? Don't do it just by yourself. You can do it as an exercise by yourself, but really sit down with the other stakeholders in your community, your executive director, your other life enrichment team members, your clinical support, especially if you're in memory care. Sit down together and talk through each of these areas, because what we found was we really identified some ways that we could really support each other. And then they set up a call to review it with me at the end of that time period. And from that, we were able to set some really specific, actionable goals for each community, right? And we were also able to identify some patterns kind of across the portfolio of things that we could do better and things that we were doing really well. So we kind of had both. So Charles, I don't know if you've got the slides to kind of show the results. I'm just being super transparent here about here was our results in 2023 and kind of how we categorized them. And so you can see we had a lot of people citing our engagement. This is for memory care specifically. We had a lot of our teams citing the engagement and technology and care that we provided as our top strength. And then weaknesses, though, interestingly, we also had lack of team engagement, training, and communication. So while some were really strong at this, others said, oh, this is not an area that we're doing great in. So with that, we were able to actually kind of partner some communities as peer mentors to support others. And then I was also able to pull out resources that they already had, but just weren't using. And maybe it was because there had been turnover in the role and somebody didn't know about it. But we were able to say, hey, like we already have resources to help you with this specific thing that you're saying is a challenge. And for opportunities, the stuff that we looked at, we kind of used the term opportunity as things that we could improve upon, right? Collectively together as a team. And so looking at family engagement, that was one of the top 3 things that came up. And so we talked about that collectively as a group, as a team, of how do we do this? And then some of our threats, you can see the top 2: competition. It's really important that our sales team, right, understands where we're positioned in the market, but that's also really strong information. It's powerful information for you guys to know too, of what's happening out there. What tools do maybe your competitors have that you don't? How are we compensating for that? And if you're able to speak to that too, in a with some business acumen behind it, right? Like, I didn't go to business school. This is not my strong suit, but it's something that you learn. If you're able to speak to that, that's really going to go a long way with your leaders as well. And that is a way for you to get the resources that you need when you can say, here's the business case for this. Here's what's happening down the street, right? And then you can go to 2024 results as well, which I did these in a graph. It's easier to read. We figure it out as we go. We get better every year, right? So these are a little bit easier to read. But again, we came up with strengths. Our top 2 was our life enrichment programs and our team. And I'm happy to report it didn't pop up as a weakness in 2024. So you can see the direct results. So we had some different stuff come up. And it was housekeeping, laundry, and maintenance, like those issues specifically within the memory care space as an opportunity. So we found one community that had their laundry and housekeeping program down to an absolute art, right? And we had them share all of their best practices with everybody else on a group training opportunity and say, take what you need from this, but this is working to the highest degree at this community. They haven't had a single complaint about laundry or housekeeping in 6 months. Like, that's impressive. And so we're able to showcase the strengths, right, and the best practices in the communities because we were able to find them through doing this. I think it was also a really powerful thing for our teams to kind of understand the marketplace as a whole for senior living, and kind of what the threats are for externally, things that you can't control, right? And looking at staffing, recruiting, which I'm sure is something that everybody kind of has a pain point with, but cost of care and pay rates too. And because that came up multiple times, we were able to do some analysis of the market and say, oh, are we not where we need to be for our team members, and make adjustments as needed there. So I think this is a tool that will give you a lot of insight into your specific program, but also help you understand where you sit in the bigger picture of the business as a whole. And if we're doing really well with that, our businesses will stay open and we will continue to get the opportunity to serve older adults. So that's my soapbox about SWOTs. It's a tool I love. I will continue to do it. And I think we will learn more from it each year.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I know you only have a couple more minutes for us, and I definitely appreciate, thank you for joining us. I know you're double booked, but so one thought in hearing you talk, Ashley, is I want to thank you of being so vulnerable, right? For me, you're being vulnerable on 2 things, right? One is you're acknowledging the fact that you don't have a business degree and you don't have business. And that is true for the vast majority of people that work in activities and life enrichment. But I think that the important part here is not, I mean, it's good to acknowledge it, but the question then becomes, what do we do about it? And this is a great tool to accomplish that. And obviously the second part of your vulnerability is, I'm just deeply grateful that you're sharing your results, because it just makes it really tangible. I think the one question I have for you, Ashley, before letting you go, is something that came up in the chat and also in the Q&A is, once you do this, give us some advice on how do I walk to my ED and have the conversation? Or how do I walk to my superior, my VP of operation, my CEO? How do I do that? Do you have any advice, or how did you do it?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I think it's probably like an easier trajectory because like they're my teammates, right? Like kind of managing this from the like 30,000 foot level, right? In your communities, I would go to your executive director, your administrator, and be able to speak to the things that you've identified here, right? Like, so for example, even just on this screen here, we're showing weaknesses as a housekeeping, laundry, and maintenance, right? And it has to be why? Why did you identify this as a weakness? Give me some of the numbers to back that up, right? We've had 10 complaints in the last 2 months on lost items, right? And that's a really way to tie that together. So anything you put here, I would have, if it's possible, the numbers to back it up, right? And I would just go to them and say, hey, like, I would like to speak with you about, I did an analysis of my programming in memory care, and I've identified some areas where we can improve. And I also wanted to talk about what we're doing really well, and just start the conversation like that with your executive director, because that's going to be your first person, right? And I'm telling you, like, look, you don't need a business degree. We wouldn't be good at what we do if we had one, honestly, because we need all types, right? Everybody has different strengths. And so your executive director is going to have that business acumen to be able to translate this a little bit more for you, right? But they're going to be your ally in this, and then they can dig in a little bit more. I had so many EDs reach out to me after this and be like, Ashley, we would like this form. I want to do it with every single department. It's been so insightful. It's been so helpful. So I think this is a very impressive thing to like rock up to your ED's office with and be like, I did a SWOT analysis of my team and my department, and I'd like to talk about it. I think that's going to be like showing such great initiative on your end, right? That you're like, this is what we're doing great. Here's where we need to improve. And here's what I think maybe we could do to get there. And then just be open-minded and open-hearted for your ED's feedback on it.
Cool. Ashley, thank you so much for your time. Please enjoy the rest of your day with your teams. And yeah, grateful and honored to have you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. If any other questions come up, Charles knows where to find me. I'm happy to talk through this if you want to try to do this on your teams as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ashley. Take care.
Have a wonderful day.
We had another question about the SWOT tool, which is how long do you work on the SWOT, the entire year, a few months, and briefly, yeah, once a year, Ashley?
So I do it annually because we're crested almost to up to 70 communities right now, and I've committed to meet with all of them individually about it. So we go through it annually, but then we set goals for them to be working towards really over the course of 6 to 12 months. Of here's goals, and then I will have check-ins also, kind of as needed with the communities. But we're doing the review annually, but then we are setting goals really to like push us through that entire next year, and then we'll meet about them kind of as needed throughout that following year.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Have a wonderful afternoon. Take care. All right, everyone. Well, just one last thought, which is kind of echoing what Ashley was sharing here. Think of this tool as a connection between your bubble, right? The resident engagement world and the business, and potentially sometimes the clinical side of things as well. So again, happy to provide these tools. We've used it. I think it's now the 3rd year. And Ashley and many other organizations I've seen to be very successful. If you have any questions, please be in touch with me directly, personally. Would love to hear and talk about it with you. Or if you would just generally want to inquire about it, feel free to connect with us with LifeLoop. So with that, and getting on to the next part of our webinar today, I'm extremely excited to share with you, in the spirit of the SWOT and other things we mentioned before, data on what we see in terms of engagement in our market. So to give you a little bit of a kind of quote unquote disclaimer, this comes from data analyzed from over 300 organizations, thousands of records of staff interacting with residents throughout the year of 2024. And we're looking at different level of care, but we're focusing on what we call supportive living, assisted living, memory care, and skilled. And just so you know, this is, we've excluded Canadian, so it's mostly US-based, well, it's not mostly, it's only US-based usage and engagement. So I just want to preface things that, last year was kind of a weird year in a sense that a lot of people were saying, we're going to thrive in 25. In many aspects, 24 had different challenges, but it wasn't a bad year. It wasn't as bad as some people had projected. Now, what's interesting is that this uncertainty, obviously for a lot of different reasons, is brought into 2025. So people are not necessarily doubting of the fact that 2025 will be a good year. People tend to be pretty optimistic, but there's still a lot of uncertainty given the, the regulatory climate and some fundamental changes. But overall, the underlying trends towards value-based care, staffing, and what we see as remnant of the pandemic seem to be these ones at the very least seems to be more stable. So that's one quick reflection on, piggybacking on the reflection I had last year on this notion of quote unquote thrive in 2025. So when we look at data overall, very excited to share that it's extremely positive and exciting for activities and life enrichment. So one of the measures that we look at is the number of contact per day per resident, right? So to give you some background, a product like LifeLoop, right, has a component to track attendance and engagement. Basically, the interaction between our team members and the residents, the families and the residents, and so on. And what we've noticed is, and obviously we take all that information and we analyze it, we compile it, and I sometimes geek about it a lot. But the point is, overall, one measure that's important is the number of contacts with our resident. And so obviously this is something that's been improving a lot since 2019, since we started really tracking it at the corporate company level. And last year was a pretty good year. We're still not at the one. The goal we recommend is one contact per day per resident, which makes sense, right? Hopefully we're touching our residents once a day through activities and programming. So we went from 0.8 in 23 to 0.9 in 24. Again, good improvement there. The other one is stable, and that's the decline ratios. And that is a good thing, right? So I can explain briefly. Decline ratio is one of my personal favorite KPI or thing to measure when I think about engagement. And it's just the percentage of programs that we offer to our residents that are then declined, right? And so think of this story. When COVID started, when our communities were in lockdown, when we could not have group programs, we saw this decline ratio go to 0, right? And so we were super curious, why is it at 0? And so we interviewed many people. And here's the feedback we got every single time. Our residents are getting so little programming. There's so little stuff happening in our communities because everything, COVID, staffing, everything happening, that they will take anything we give them, right? Which is kind of sad. And so think of decline ratio as the voice of your residents, right? Even in memory care, people, even if they're nonverbal, there's always a way, there's always a mean for people to refuse programs, right? And so the decline ratio is a good measure to know, our residents kind of voicing their choice. And so obviously we always want to know why, right? Is it because the programming isn't accurate, isn't person-centered? Is it not adapted to their physical cognitive journey? Or is it just simply like the bad time of the day? And the fact that it's stable is a good thing because we've always thought of a healthy balance between 20 to 30%. It's still now at 31%, so it's still slightly high, but it's hopefully will start to go down between, again, 20 to 30. So the fact that it's stable is a really good thing. The next one is kind of one of my big favorite, which is how much programming are we offering, right? So our tool, our product, can help you identify the amount of programming of engagement that's given to your residents. And so quite simply, in 2023, we saw an average of 29 minutes of engagement per day. Okay, remember one of my very early slides, in skilled, it was 11 minutes a day, in AL, 20 minutes a day. So obviously kind of great improvements. And then in 2024, we are at 31, which continues to be improvements. And I think There's a lot of reasons for that, but one, we see more and more organizations that are intentional, like I said, intentional about programming. So they're thinking really like, how much activities are we providing? How much engagement are we providing? And how can we kind of create the best experiences for our residents? So hopefully this will continue improving. I'm very, very optimistic for 25 to be a great year for engagement when it comes to quantity and also quality. And we didn't have time today, but think of quality as a mix between, does it match the preferences of your residents? And is it on the cognitive or physical scale of what they need, right? And what they want. So in essence, optimistic, and I'm happy to share that we continue to see these improvements. And then the last but not least is the percentage of population engaged, right? So quite simply, think of the number of residents you have under your care, right? So if you're in one assisted living, you have roughly, like on average, 60 residents, right? Roughly. If you have multi-communities, your numbers can be in the thousands. But the question is always, am I engaging all of my residents, right? That's a great question. That's a good question. That is probably one of the questions we might want to ask ourselves. And really happy to report that increase across all of our clients a whole year from 23 to 24 was a 7% increase. Okay. Now you might ask yourself, well, yeah, I want to be at 100. 100% is hard. It is really, really hard. But hopefully we're getting closer and closer to that. And again, quite simply, it's this marketing promise that we're delivering to our residents. So again, great improvement. And also I remain extremely optimistic for 2025 on this point as well. So hopefully these data points provide insights to you. If you are using these as a way to manage engagement, good job, and hopefully you're finding the levers to improve. If you're considering them, please be in touch with me or LifeLoop. We have great ways to help. And, think of it simply like whether you use an electronic tool or not, this is what we should be doing in engagement, right? Simply, we should be trying to improve quantity and quality of engagement. So for the next part of our webinar today, we were hoping to do a more interactive session, and we have a few poll questions. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to get your Zoom window ready, and Emily is going to help us go through 6 questions. And think of these questions as simple questions for all of us to know how we're doing. LifeLoop, obviously, we're very interested in developing the best solutions out there. So this is knowledge that we want, but you should also consider that to know, how you're comparing to other organizations. And like Ashley said, potentially use this to help you have conversations with your teams and so on and so on, right? So the first question simply is, are you consistently getting help from other departments? So when I say consistently is, is the clinical team or the care team helping you, with programming, getting your residents to programs? And when we say consistently, think of this more like, like, is it part of a process on a, I don't know, like a weekly or daily basis? Not, the opposite of consistently is when you need to go and ask every single time. The second question, which is one of my favorite ones, is, does your department collaborate with marketing, right? And the premise here is quite simply that activities, the experience we provide to your residents, I'm biased, but I'd say it's probably one of the best ways to sell a community, right? That is what people want when they consider senior living, is this sense of belonging, this sense of purpose, which is inherently what we do in activities. So to give us an idea of how much you're collaborating with this marketing and sales and marketing department, simple question is, how frequently do you collaborate with that team? Okay, so is it daily? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? You know, I've had responses before and I cannot check out the results. Sometimes we have nevers, right? So right now, out of 115 people who respond, it's sadly 32% are saying never. I'll come back in a second to analyze the results quickly. But the third one is one of my personal favorite one because, you know, in memory care, even in IL, in assisted living, but in dementia care more broadly, you know, one of the litmus tests of a good experience is how are we working and helping our residents through behavior expressions. And obviously, it's very hard if we don't get help from other departments, including clinical. So question number 3 here is, do you get help from your clinical care department with managing behavior expression? Yes or no? The fourth question here is tools for purposeful engagement, right? Simply, do you have the tools and staff to engage all of your residents with purpose? Yes or no, right? So staff is basically team members on your team or access to team members that work in other departments but can help you. And obviously tools are quite simply, you know, obviously tools like LifeLoop or other resident engagement platform, but it could be a subscription to Activity Connection. It could be using something in our electronic health record, or simple things like, you know, you're doing arts and crafts. Do you have tools to do arts and crafts? So basically, do you have all the tools to provide engagement that is purposeful to your residents? Question number 5, last but not least, kind of going back to Ashley's discussion here, is how frequently do you discuss resident and family satisfaction with your administrator or executive director, right? So if you are in a regional or corporate role, maybe ask yourself with your chief operating officer, I mean, the person basically you report to. If you're in a community, think of your administrator or your executive director. The reason why we are interested in satisfaction is that it's one of the great ways, even when we're thinking about dementia care, we can collect satisfaction. Satisfaction is a great way to connect the work we do with the business outcome, right? And, you know, you might have seen these questions like, would you recommend a service to someone? These are satisfaction questions, and they're trying to gauge, you know, connect business to the line of work by saying, you know, is this person going to recommend our business and so on, right? So that's a very important one. And then number 6, I've already said I had favorites, but this one is a pretty big high on the list, right? So if the background here and the reason why I think it's fascinating to know this is, you know, my wife is a teacher, right? And she always said, you know, I have trouble with classes that have 20 or sometimes 30 students. What I know, Charles, what I know when I talk to activity directors is that sometimes we have activity directors that work with 60 residents and it's a one-person department. And you cannot know 60 person, right? It's like a really personally. And so it is extremely hard for us as an industry to be able to deliver on person-directed living if our teams do not have tools to know your residents, right? So this is one is, you know, I almost want to say that they're mission critical, right, in engagement. And so here the question is, how do you get to know your residents, right? Do you have tools to help to know them? So these tools can be, well, LifeLoop has one, but all of these platforms have different quote unquote life stories. Another type of product out there could be in your electronic health record. Some of us might still be using paper documents or form, which is fine. Don't get me wrong, it's good. It means you have a process. But these are different levels. So please let us know. And I think we've gone quite a few responses here. Let's see. Yeah. So all of you, you know, please take time to look at the results. I think, Amelia, we might be able to close the poll here.
Yep, it is closed and it should be sharing the results with everyone.
Oh, awesome. So everybody can see the results? Is that, everybody can see the results?
Yes, they can. Mhm.
Awesome, great. Well, then that's going to save me a lot of time. So please take snapshots of these or copy them down, especially the areas where you feel that you're not doing as well as other other of your colleagues here. But this is a pretty sizable sample, right? You can see we have over 200 questions in each, sorry, over 200 answers in each questions. Number one, quickly, I would say this is really hard for me to see because it's pretty consistent with past. There's an improvement, but I think that we need help from other departments, right? We're not there 24/7. We can't be engaging 60 residents, even if we're super efficient. So it's really critical for us to get help. So please take some of these results and share this with your team, share this with your superior. Number two, I've explained this a little bit. I don't know if daily is the best goal. I like to see weekly cadences, right? I like to see teams that are meeting on a weekly basis with a marketing and sales leader. So if you're daily or weekly, I'd say this is good. If you're monthly, again, you're doing it, which is better than never, but try to see if you can improve the cadence. And if you want to have advice on how, please get in touch with me or get in touch with us. The third one is that's pretty good, but still, about a third people don't collaborate with clinical. That's a big, especially if we're trying to reduce the use of antipsychotics. That's a big opportunity here. Number four, this has seen a lot of improvements. Obviously, I started in senior 16, 17 years ago, and at the time there were little tools out there. But I would say that obviously, if you don't have tools, it's a discussion that maybe the SWOT tool can help you leverage. Like for example, if you're not engaging all of your residents, maybe you want to be more efficient. To be more efficient, you probably want to save time on the programs you're building. And so activity connection or other product or maybe even LifeLoop can be a great way to support that. Number five, yeah, I've explained the reasoning behind satisfaction. Again, the same thing with marketing and sales. If I'm an activity director, I want to get credit for the work that I do. And the best credit I can get, besides my residents being happy, is to know that I'm contributing to the business, right? We're running businesses, like Ashley said. And so satisfaction is one of the biggest levers there. And then number six, is how do we know our residents? And again, please understand, if you're using paper, it is much better than not having anything. But the benefit of using something that's electronic is, beyond the fact that we're saving time, is the fact that, again, whether it's an EHR or LifeLoop or some of the other products out there, the benefit is the information can be shared across your team members and can also be analyzed, right? So wouldn't it be cool, for example, if if I moved into your community and because I'm French, you could say, hey, these are all of the other French speakers we have, right? That just connecting residents based on preferences is one of the many benefits of some of these more modern tools. So hopefully this was helpful. Again, please screenshot this, use this with the SWOT to see how you can improve. And again, thank you so much for collaborating with us. We're a little over time now. And what I'd like to do is quickly go to the Q&A. Yeah, I think we've addressed most of the questions. Yeah. And I'd like to share just a few last insights before we wrap up to today, which is there is a model which exists in other countries called social prescription. It's not very, it hasn't really caught up in the US yet today. It's just simply this idea of elevating engagement to work better with the clinical side of things. And so it is not new for us that work in activities. Some of you that are rec therapists are probably well trained in this model called API, assess, plan, implement, and evaluate. And it's basically social prescription is a way to make API systematic, okay? And so to give you an idea, if you can Google social prescription, for example, Canada, there's a lot of great things out there. And on this topic, sorry, and think of it simply where if I have depression, my doctor can always prescribe to me medication to help me with my depression, but also, and this is in Canada, can also prescribe to me an annual pass to the National Parks and Services with the premise that, as most of us know, that nature heals, right? If I walk outside, if I'm in contact with nature, this is very beneficial for my health. And so think of social prescription as a way to drive models together. We in senior living, we definitely inherit a very institutional model that comes from nursing homes and so on. And so think of social prescription as a way to really do what's right for our resident and elevate engagement. Obviously, to do this, technology is a great way to achieve this. This is one of the studies we did with Activity Strong that I'm the most proud of. We had responses of over 700 organizations, and quite simply were able to show that if you use technology, you are twice more likely to create individual plans for residents. In other words, if you use technology, you're twice more likely to deliver on person-centered, person-directed living. This is the 85-35-1 rule that I mentioned. Just checking time, we have 2 minutes left, but at a high level, think of 85 as the percentage of your population engaged, 35, the amount of minutes per day, so 35 is the goal. And as I explained previously, 1 is we want to be in touch, like offer programs to our residents at least once per day. As I wrap up, this is one final slide to share with you, whether we are in a value-based care model, which is most of us are probably not, but many of our organizations are thinking about it. Sometimes you can replace the word value-based care with the word wellness, right? How can you think about measurements? So in programming or in the resident experience and life enrichment, we would focus on engagement, on satisfaction, on the fact that the requests of our residents are met, different customer assessments, and this notion of congruence. Is activities provided, do they match the preferences of our residents? And then the second or third bucket are more clinical or business in nature. But usually, if we do these well, all of these follow, which is one of the kind of really exciting things in this wellness and this value-based care change. So with that, I want to share with you one last resource, one of my favorite one. It's from the International Council on Active Aging. They have a lot of different products to help you kind of think intentionally about experience, about wellness. One of them is called the Blueprint on Wellness. And I think we'll have a webinar on this in the coming few months. But again, just Google ICAA Blueprint for Wellness. So hopefully this wasn't too much content. I was so excited to spend time with you. Thank you so much for the interaction. Thank you so much for your responses. It's a great way for us to understand where you are at. And with that, here is my email if you want to be in touch. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you is just kind of a few closing thoughts, which is that, our market right now is definitely going through this transition from resident engagement to general community wellness. So it's important for you and your teams to have the bandwidth to plan and facilitate an engagement program. And really, this is where companies like LifeLoop can help you streamline that. Another note that I wanted to share, and I didn't have time to cover it as a topic because it's a huge topic, is AI. But think of AI as a way to facilitate some of the things that you're trying to do every day. And then the last thing is we're definitely in a period of our industry where we don't want to be managing a lot of different systems. So when you're thinking about products or solutions out there, maybe think of solutions that help you by streamlining operations, streamlining everything that you're doing. Excited to share with you also upcoming educational resources. The next one is one of my favorite of the year, and it's the third time we're bringing to you the Validation World Congress. Big fan of the work of the Validation Training Institute, and this year we're focusing on creative arts and how it helps lead a purposeful life for people living with cognitive change. And then the webinar we have after that is all about purpose as a lifelong anchor, adapting and thriving through change. And this is going to be led by Anna Orr, who's the Chief Culture and Community Officer with an amazing organization called Front Porch. And this is my last slide for you all, which is a way for us to stay in touch, stay in the loop. And this is where you'll find all of the resources. Again, thank you for being with us. As importantly, or maybe more, thank you for the work that you do every day by helping senior living residents find purpose. Have a good one. If you have any questions, please be in touch. And again, so long. Have a great day.